Welcome back to the Bad Millennial Podcast. It's your host, Liz, and I'm here with a very special episode because I have another guest. Oh my gosh, everybody, please welcome Jackie to the pod.
Hi, everyone.
Jackie and I, we met through work, but honestly, we got closer and closer because we have so many things in common that we love, most specifically books. So this is going to be a heavy book related episode. If you guys have followed me at all before this, you know that I have a Bookstagram, which is a book Instagram. And, oh, actually, I should probably promote my Bookstagram. Yeah, my Bookstagram is called Another writer account. Yeah. So everything that really has to do with books that I love, stuff I'm reading, stuff I find in the wild, that's me. But yeah, Jackie also has a Bookstagram account. It's called Catherine Morris Writes, where she shares her Bookstagram adventures, and she's very into fantasy. But yeah, Jackie, talk a little bit about your love of books, Bookstagram, and what do you have brewing for us?
Ooh, let's see. Okay, so I am a really big fan of fantasy books, especially. I would say I read a lot of kind of like young adult fantasy. I still really enjoy that genre even as an adult. Just because like the pacing tends to be really good. I like the voice overall of YA, or young adult. And then I also like read many other genres of books as well. But I'd say like, especially on my Bookstagram, I definitely speak about fantasy the most often.
I love it. Could you explain Bookstagram, the community, and like, is there a difference between Bookstagram and Book Talk and BookTube?
Ooh, yes. Okay. So I am not technically on Book Talk just because when I watch too many short videos, I get a little bit of a headache. So like even my Instagram, I very much tailor it so that it pretty much only shows me like static posts and very rarely shows me reels. But I would say like there's definitely overlaps in all three of those communities, but I would say you can kind of go to each one for something a little bit different. I would say Book Talk, at least from what I've seen, is kind of more definitely short videos and kind of more like about expressing like how you are as a fan and like having a happy, good, fun time. And I'd also say, like, kind of how people present themselves on Book Talk tends to be less aesthetic than Instagram, where Instagram's very much about like having a beautiful video or beautiful pictures and like wonderful aesthetic, whether that's like something like cottagecore or like dark academia or like something like that. While like Book Talk, I think, is a little bit more casual. And then with BookTube, I would say that kind of goes more analytical. So usually people have like longer videos, anywhere from like 20 minutes to like over an hour, talking about either like book reviews. Sometimes they'll do like new things they have on their shelves or that they're like taking off their shelves, things they borrowed from the library, goings on within the book community and what drama has come up on like the site formerly known as Twitter or Threads. That's kind of where
Yeah.
I kind of see the distinction between at least those three social media platforms as far as books. But I think you're on Book Talk definitely more than I am. Like, what do you tend to see there, and how would you say that's kind of different as
I
far as
would
the other communities?
Yeah, I would definitely say Book Talk is a lot more casual and relaxed. Although I have seen people kind of fall to what song is going to be the most popular, or they're just talking about what the most popular books are. Versus for me, I kind of do prefer Bookstagram because there's a level of love and community and understanding versus Book Talk, since it's on TikTok, it's all about the algorithm, all about the likes. And when you find that formula that works, people tend to stick to that a lot more.
Mhm.
Um, and which is kind of sad because like really you just want to express your love of books, whether it's popular or not, and you do want to highlight underrepresented artists, people of color, BIPOC authors. And I just feel like book talk is very much kind of weeded down in the what's going to work for the algorithm. Now
Yeah.
booktube, like I feel like you would be great on booktube, book YouTube, because that whole explanation about the different communities was awesome. Like I would definitely listen to you break down a review, but your bookstagram is like really pretty. Like the aesthetics and the photos are gorgeous. And even though I'll say personally, I'm not the biggest fantasy reader, like my last big fantasy push was probably in the Harry Potter and Twilight days. But you make me want to read fantasy, and you actually did influence me to read fantasy with the whole Fourth Wing book series by what's her name, Rebecca Yarros, right?
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you were like, you know what, this is a really good book, you can do it. Because for some reason big books just like, I love how they look, but then it's like as an adult and a busy millennial, there's like no time to tackle them. And which I'm always like
Yes.
endorsing, audiobooks so you can get through it faster. But fantasy, there's something to be said about being able to escape into a totally different world that's not predictable or similar to your own life, for sure.
Yeah. That's really what I love about fantasy. It's like these characters have bigger problems than me. I'll watch what they do.
Exactly. I don't have to fight off a dragon. I just have to make a deadline. I love that so much. What would you say if you had to guess where your like top five books? And it could be fantasy, it could be any other series, but like what would your top five books be that you would recommend for millennials?
Ooh, okay. The first one I have on the list is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Then I'm going to talk about Babel by R.F. Kang. And then Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. The Broken Earth series, the first book is the fifth season by N.K. Jensen. And then Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So I kind of tried to find five fantasy books that like I absolutely love each and every one of them, but are all kind of very different from each other. So if someone was listening to this, they might be like, The Cruel Prince isn't for me, but they might like something else on the list, like Babel. So I will jump into what each of those books is about without further ado. Okay, so The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So I am I love this book. It is a YA fantasy book, and it is a fae book. So pretty much or a fairy book. What that
Oh,
is it's pretty much a book that it's about like Irish mythology like creatures. Like think like elves like Legolas in Lord of the Rings. I think that's the best way to kind of like describe a fae book. I would say the most popular book in like that subgenre is A Court of Thorns and Roses, which you've probably seen
I've
at
heard of that one. Yep. That's a
yeah,
huge
that's
one.
like
Definitely on Bookstagram. Yeah.
yes, that is a huge book on Bookstagram and Book Talk, especially within like the romantasy fantasy kind of umbrella. So if people have already read A Court of Thorns and Roses, I would definitely recommend this one. Kind of similar themes a little bit. But I will get into that. So anyways, I absolutely love this book. Holly Black, the author, is one of the authors that got me into reading as a kid with her Spiderwick Chronicles series, and then
Nice.
got me back into reading as an adult with this series. So it has a very special place in my heart. My cat's name is Carden after one of the main characters in this series, so I'm just a huge fan. But pretty much as far as what is it about? Our main character, Jude, she is a human, but she wants to belong like within the fairy kingdom. So she wants to become a knight, but that doesn't quite work out for her. And one of the reasons is because one of the princes of fairy named Carden is like her worst enemy. They do not get along.
Oh gosh, it's like an enemies to enemies type start.
Yeah, like the main trope is like enemies to lovers, but very much a slow burn.
Mm.
So like the first book, it's like there is like I think like two kisses maybe like within the entire first book, and then the
Oh,
second
that's
one.
really slow. That's a slow,
Oh,
slow
oh
for me.
yeah, second book, it's like things get a little bit more spicy, but not so much. It's also YA though, so you're not gonna have like more like
Yeah,
explicit sex scenes like that you might have in like an actual, say, like romance fantasy or romantasy
true,
book. Um,
true.
some people, since this is also one of the bigger-ish fantasy books on like book talk and bookstagram, but I feel like it gets misrepresented. A lot of people will say, oh, this is like a romantasy book, and I would actually argue that it's not really. I still think it's a great book. I think romantasy readers will like it if they're into kind of like that slow burn enemies to lovers, but it's really a lot more about like kind of like the politics and courtly intrigue, that kind of stuff.
Oh,
Since
okay.
I know a lot of people who they're like, oh, I went into this book expecting romantasy, and either I still really liked it but it wasn't what I expected, or they're kind of disappointed because they were expecting something a little bit more like Fourth Wing or A Court of Thorns and Roses.
That's a good
um
call out.
yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, whenever I'm kind of talking about that book, I like to kind of give that as like a disclaimer, that it's like if you're looking for the spice, this probably isn't really the book for that. But it's still excellent. I absolutely love it. But the romance is like very much a subplot. It's like the subplot of the subplot. Like it's important,
It's
but
yeah. It's like implied, but that's not the focus here.
right, exactly. Yeah, the main plot is more about like the main character being a badass and like being a spy and like sometimes killing people. It's
Love that.
beautiful. I love it. It's a very like fast-paced read. It's also like each book is around 300 pages, so not super long, which is nice. But yeah,
For
that's
people who are readers, that's not super long. For
okay. Yeah,
people who are like,
that's fair. That's fair. It's shorter than Fourth Wing, so there's that.
that's true, but the writing is so detailed and you can see the world. You're like, you really feel like you're in it. That's the kind of writing I love because I forgot that I was reading a book, honestly. I was just pouring through it and binging through it. Love
Oh my
that. But
gosh.
like, and I would you consider Fourth Wing to be like a YA fantasy or kind of?
Ooh, that is a great question. So, Fourth Wing is adult fantasy. You could throw it under the romantasy umbrella, I would say.
Mhm,
Especially with the second book where the romance becomes like a much bigger part of the book. That's
mhm.
also kind of why, at least for me, I like the first book a little bit more because it was a bit more plot heavy. That's just kind of where I am as a reader. I love plot stuff, and then I love like a romance subplot. But when romance is like the main plot, that's where I. It depends. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this is awesome, and sometimes I'm like, I need more plot.
That's crazy. I feel like I'm probably a little bit the opposite. I live for romance books, and so I'm kind of in this middle of the second book of the series. But like when anything with the slow burn and like enemies to lovers or something, I'm so into that that the plot for me it's okay for it to play second fiddle a little bit. I don't know, maybe I'm like a romantic at heart or something, but I just really live for a good romance. That's not, you can predict certain things because this one is not predictable at all. But yeah. But outside of romance, I do appreciate my books that have plot. Like it's got to go somewhere. We can't just be one note. Yeah, that's it. I've never thought of that plot over romance or like kind of what you value more.
Oh
Huh.
yeah, I think about that a lot because romantasy is kind of a emerging genre. Well, I guess it's been there, but like especially like YA books, we have a lot of those books that has like your normal kind of fantasy mission plot, whatever, and then you
Yeah.
have like that romantic subplot. And then so with romantasy books, we're kind of seeing a little bit more focus on the romance within a fantasy world. But it kind of like depends on the book, just like how strong like the plot and world building are compared to like the romance. And then some like Fourth Wing, I would say, has like, especially in the first book, I think a really good balance between like both of those elements. While there's other romantasy books I've read that I was like, oh, this is like very focused on the romance. And then I was like, but the world building, it doesn't make sense in this
The
book.
world building, yeah, I've heard that as like a common complaint. Like, there's no world building. Like, you give me one map and then we never discuss it again, or like you forget, you don't even know where they are, right? Like, I guess it's
Yeah.
also why, yeah, a lot of fantasy books, like when you can build a full world and then also a plot in it, that's almost like the best kind of fantasy book. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I really like. And then like in the romantasy subgenre, just because it's kind of something that's a little bit more emerging, but has really taken off in like a big way, especially with like Fourth Wing, I feel like really became a phenomenon on the internet. A Court of Thorns and Roses and Sarah J. Maas's books, I would say, also kind of has like that crossover appeal as well, kind of similar to Fourth Wing. But I don't think those books took off like as quickly as say like Fourth Wing did. I besides like Harry Potter or something like that, I've never seen like a book take off like that fast. The next book I would say also like fairly popular like in within bookish communities, especially like the fantasy community, is Babel by R.F. Kuang. So this is actually a historical fantasy. So pretty much what that is it's like our world, but like there's magic, or like there's some things that are like very different about that world that are kind of like fantasy related. So
Hmm.
this book mostly takes place in Oxford, England, like at the School of Oxford, in the 1800s. And it is very interesting in how it like looks at colonialism and deconstructs colonialism. So that's kind of like one of the things that I really found super interesting about this book. So the magic system has to do with translation between languages. So it's pretty much you have two words and then in two different languages, and then pretty much the what is lost in translation creates like the magic that then England uses to like do their plumbing and run their roads and control their colonies, because the British Empire be like that,
Yeah.
unfortunately. um so anyways, this book is about a boy who was born in China but now lives in England. His name is Robin. He finds himself caught between Babel, which is like the translation school in Oxford, that they pretty much create this magic that then allows the empire to, the British Empire to function. And then
Wow.
he finds himself kind of caught up with an organization that wants to stop imperial expansion. And kind of the main question of the book is, can powerful institutions be changed from within, or does revolution always require violence? And the book is literally called Babel, or the Necessities of Violence. So a little bit of a spoiler there.
A little bit.
Um, but really, Babel is just like such an interesting book. I just find it like a very unique book. I think it's a very timely book. And I think that it talks about like important topics, which I really just love when fantasy like approaches like those things in the real world and kind of sheds light on like empire and the cruelty of empire.
Yeah.
And like looks at ways to like deconstruct colonialism.
That one's so interesting. I've never, well, one, this is my first time hearing that book because when you said Babel, I was just thinking of the language translation app, but in a way, it kind of is that same thing. And I also do love how you can kind of address real world issues or even historical issues because what happens in your history still affects your present, affects your future. So that's a really interesting recommendation. I love that. What's your
Yeah,
next
I
one?
highly recommend that book. Another book, kind of going for, it's not quite romantasy, but it does have like a strong multiple strong romantic subplots. This is an adult book. It is called Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. She has a lot of really excellent books. One of her other really good series is the Scholomance series, which is actually another book that's about like language and translation and how that leads to magic, which is interesting since we were just kind of talking about Babel. But that book is pretty much like Harry Potter if the school was like actively trying to kill the students. Um,
Oh, wow. That's wow. Wait,
yeah.
so are the students willingly enrolling in this school and
So
they just
they
don't know?
So they do willingly enroll in the school. They're like wizard students from around the world. And they actually enroll there because it's actually safer to be in the school because the school blocks out most of the monsters, but monsters still get in there actively trying to kill them. And it's like survival
Wow.
of the fittest. As
Oh,
far as like,
wow.
and then pretty much if they're able to graduate, they're more likely to be able to make it in the real world as wizards. That's a great series. Highly recommend it. I was like debating between that one and Spinning Silver, but I was like, I'm gonna go with Spinning Silver as kind of like my other recommendation. It is a retelling of the fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and it really leads into Slavic mythology, so like Russian, Lithuanian, Polish, other countries that kind of go under that Slavic umbrella, Slovenia, which is where my family is from. Um but anyways, so this particular book follows the daughter of a Jewish moneylender who gains a reputation of being able to turn silver into gold. She, at least at first, doesn't do this magically. It's just that that's her reputation since she's very good at like getting that money back.
Mm.
But because she has that reputation, she catches the attention of the Staric King, which is like an elf king. And he's like, okay, I want you to turn the silver I have into gold, which
Make me
causes
rich.
problems for her.
Of course.
Um, but yeah, it's a very atmospheric book. It also has multiple first person point of view narrators, which in other books I've read hasn't worked out so well. But Naomi Novik is just such a good author and so good at being able to like really get into the heads of those characters that
Oh, I love
it's
that.
really good. Yeah, I love that book. And it's a standalone, which is nice.
I like that's awesome. I'm gonna have to, yeah, I'm just gonna have to put more stuff on my what do we call it in the Bookstagram world? Oh, my TBR list, which is
Yes.
my to be read list. Oh, I hate to interrupt, but that was getting really good. So, of course, I have to leave a teaser for more. Come back for part two of our Bookstagram love episode. I am having so much fun talking to Jackie about all of her books, but we're going to save the final two for next week. So definitely come back to the pod to hear what the final two top fantasy recommendations are. And while you're waiting, why don't you visit my Etsy page or go check out my other videos on YouTube? I just wanted to remind you that merch is available as always at Etsy. If you go to badmillennialshop.etsy.com, you can also shop on my website at badmillennialpod.com to rock the same shirt that I'm rocking. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, leave a review, and hit the like buttons there too. Thanks so much again for listening to this week's episode of Bad Millennial. Got a question you want me to answer in the future? Go ahead, leave a voice message on Spotify. DM and follow me on Instagram at Bad Millennial Pod and on Twitter at _Bad Millennial _. I'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye.